November 12th at Stony Brook University in Long Island. I'm here to see Amara Lakhous. Lakhous is an Algerian-born writer. He was first a refugee, then an immigrant, and now a citizen of Italy. His novels paint a vivid picture of the issues facing a multicultural Italian society. Lakhous has won the top literary awards in both his native and adopted countries for his work. He's here as the keynote speaker at a conference discussing the challenges facing the Mediterranean region. He opens with an analysis of European current events making headlines here in the United States, such as the alarming wave of Syrian refugees that have flooded into the continent over the past year.
Every foreigner arriving in Europe must be permitted to present a request for asylum.
The day after Lakhous' speech at Stony Brook, a massive terrorist attack on Paris targeting cafes, the Bataclan Concert Hall, and the Stade de France claimed the lives of 130 people. It is the deadliest strike in Europe since 2004. Its victims made up a diverse palette of races, nationalities, and religions. It was the second attack in Paris perpetrated by Islamist terrorist groups this year. The attackers were all citizens of the European Union. And for better or for worse, Lakhous' comments on immigrant integration and the challenges of radical Islam take on a new sense of immediacy. I sat down with Lakhous a few days later at NYU's Casa Italiana. The Paris attacks were heavy on our minds. We talked about radicalization and its connection to marginalized migrant communities across Europe. We then returned to the continent's history with refugees, as well as Lakhous' work, his life story, and his own relationship to Islam.
In France, I think we can't understand Muslim immigration without working on French memory, colonial memory. So we have the international context, it's very important, and then we have local context, and we have to understand the situation in France, because we are dealing with French people. So the big risk today is criminalize all the Muslims, and they are doing this. After the attacks in Paris, there is an Italian newspaper in the first page with the big title, Bastardi Islamici, Bastards Muslims. And in the world, there are 1.5 billion of Muslims. They found in ISIS and the terrorism, their narrative. So they are criminals, and you have to be very, very severe with them. But the rest, you have to be very careful. Be careful with media, the policies, the decisions, and try to isolate this.
Lakhous' knowledge of the foreigner experience in Europe comes from a more personal place than mere decades of observation. He arrived in Italy in 1995 after fleeing his native Algeria. Having lived the refugee experience for himself, he's now able to understand the setbacks they face when compared to other migrants.
The main difference between a refugee and immigrant, that a refugee has the possibility to choose to leave or to stay instead of refugee. So refugee doesn't have another option. It's like Syrians today. They don't have, the option to stay. They have to leave.
Lakhous can trace his own departure from Algeria back to the oppressive political climate that began to take shape in the years before his birth in 1970. The tensions reached their boiling point 3 years before Lakhous left the country, when a 1992 election turned into a bloody civil war. The conflict pitted the conservative military against the even more radical Islamic Salvation Front. It is presumed that as many as 200,000 Algerians died during the conflict. Intellectuals and journalists were targeted by both sides.
Religion, is like a cage. If you are a believer, 100%, you have to believe in this narrative, and you are closed in the cage. So I refused this closed narrative. I wanted something open.
He grew up trilingual, speaking Arabic, French, and Berber, the language of the ethnic minority to which his large family belonged. He matriculated in philosophy, read Madame Bovary, wrote his first novel at 23, and dreamed of traveling the world to learn about other cultures. But Lakhous' curiosity wasn't just incompatible with the local atmosphere, it made him a target of the violence.
I was journalist in Algerian radio, and I had trouble like all the journalists at the time, so I decided to escape. So my challenge actually was to transform a very sad story, a tragedy, because being a refugee is not easy. So I tried to transform something negative in positive.
He's gone about changing his narrative by exploring others in his fiction. 3 of Lakhous's novels have been translated into English by New Yorker editor Anne Goldstein. All 3 deal with tensions that rise between Italian nationals and migrants living in close quarters. Perhaps the best known is Clash of Civilizations over an elevator in Piazza Vittorio. It's a murder mystery, told from the point of view of different residents of an apartment building in Rome. It was made into an Italian film in 2010 and inspired by Lakhous's time living in the ethnically diverse neighborhood of Piazza Vittorio.
Reality is very complex, so we need more voices, not just one voice. So I'm so interested in to have a choral narrative with different voices, male, female, young, old, Italian, non-Italian, etc. I think it's more challenging. When you immigrate, you lose the protection, the cultural protection. So because you become part of minority. And for me, being part of minority is a big opportunity because you have to ask new questions. You have to find a new narrative. So in Italy, I tried to construct a new narrative, and Clash of Civilizations of an elevator is the result of this new narrative.
The most interesting thing about the novel may be that Lakhous wrote it in Italian, a language he didn't master until he was in his mid-20s. He repeated the process on his 2 other novels available in English, Divorce Islamic Style and Dispute Over a Very Italian Piglet. This use of the language puts him in a selective group of authors like Milan Kundera and Joseph Conrad, who wrote often in languages they hadn't mastered until late in life.
My ambition is to Arabize Italian and Italianize Arabic. And last year I moved to New York, and I decided to enlarge my dream. So from bilingual writer, and now I have a new dream. My American dream is to become trilingual writer, to write in Arabic, Italian, and English.
So I'm thinking back to the quote that from your talk last week on Long Island.
I don't believe in clash of civilizations. The clash is between ignorance.
Is there some kind of responsibility for art to be tolerant regardless of its origin? Is there some requirement for that kind of narrative?
I think it's very important to be very open, very curious, and believing that there are more truths, not just one. Of course, it's very hard for, if you are a Muslim, a believer, or a Christian or Jew to believe in other truths. But I think respect is basic. When you read the novel, you can find people different than you. In terms of religion, of culture, but there you can find similarities, and you can understand that all people have dreams. All parents and mothers care about their children. There are a lot of children, they love their parents. We have human identity, and we used to forget this.